it's a good segue. The last chapter of the book, for those of you who haven't got that far yet, is called Design Activism, and this is the kind of social conscience and is very dear part of CCA and who we are here. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the applications of design thinking to some of the problems you've taken on, IDEO's taken on in developing countries.
Yeah, I mean, part of our reason for wanting to do this, and my reason for wanting to do it is part of the reason I have for doing everything new in design, which is at some level just severe attention deficit disorder, that I just, I want to find new and interesting problems to tackle, and I want to find the toughest problems to tackle, because they're the ones that I find personally most rewarding. And there's no doubt that problems of, water distribution and malaria and other diseases and education and things like this in the developing world, and unfortunately, and actually in the developed world too, are really tough problems. The interesting thing is, I think what we're learning is that the route to solving those problems is not quite perhaps what we thought it might be, in that it isn't about a bunch of bright folks in California or Europe or anywhere else coming up with a solution and then sort of exporting it to India or Africa or South America or wherever it might be, China. That a large part of the opportunity for tackling these problems is actually around building the capacity of people to solve the problems for themselves.
Like microfinancing?
Well, microfinance is a great example of an infrastructure that creates opportunity for people. But I'm actually talking about the ability for people to design for themselves. And we're just coming to the end of a project that we've been working on for the last couple of years with the Acumen Fund that Brenda mentioned earlier, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which was all around the topic of water distribution, and particularly on how that last mile or 2 miles or 100 yards, whatever it is, of water distribution in the developing world is a problem. That you might have a clean water source, but by the time it gets into containers back to the home, that you then get a lot of contamination, you get a lot of disease from that contamination. We were interested in solving that problem. And we thought that meant we were going to design some new water containers or maybe some new business models or whatever in California and take them to India and Africa. And we went and did this big research kind of effort and realized there's no way we were going to solve the problem that way. And so what we ended up doing was working with a whole series of NGOs in India, first in India and then more recently in Kenya, running essentially a huge, great design program with them, where we did workshops, we helped them create new ideas, we then did a kind of an open source competition, we funded some of those ideas, and then we coached the teams that had developed those ideas for weeks and months, until at the point where they could actually launch. And they were launching all kinds of things. I mean, some of them are containers, some of them are new water delivery services, some of them are new ways of communicating the value of clean water to village populations, all kinds of stuff. And so that is actually, we think, and it's still pretty early, I have to say, but we think that approach is ultimately going to have more of an impact than us coming up with all the solutions in California. Yeah. So it's a coaching, teaching, training, tool building, and designing. I mean, our teams have been there designing, but they've been designing with people on the ground, people who are actually going to make these solutions work. Because the problem that we forget, particularly for me as an industrial designer, I'm used to working with very, very competent organizations who execute my ideas. I might do a lot of it. I mean, or IDEO might engineer those things, then we may even go and design the manufacturing lines for them. But essentially, the responsibility for execution and delivery lies with the company that I designed for. Sure. And they're very good at it for the most part, and the ones that aren't very good at it usually don't last very long. But we forget that when we start, sometimes, when we're tackling these social issues, we forget that you need a delivery mechanism just like you do in the commercial world, and foundations are not it. I can absolutely guarantee you that foundations are not it. Even ones with the depth and scale and money of the Gates Foundation, they don't deliver. They enable, they do not deliver. Right. So you've got to find the people that do. And these are these often wonderful NGOs of various scales who are operating locally, sometimes they're operating internationally, who do have the ability to deliver. And we have to work with them.
Yeah. One of the most fascinating moments in the book, I think, and you've been talking about it, is this idea, and I'll quote this, a new participatory social contract. And you were talking about the kind of social contract you had for the people you were designing with, I should say, in India. So you're going from human-centered research empathic research, in which you're trying to understand the people that you're designing for, and at a certain point, that becomes a co-design sort of project. I mean, you're really calling for almost equal partners here, or at least working with in a very deep and profound way. I think that's incredibly exciting.